This is going to be a quick tutorial about using my asset packs. Specifically, we're going to just work with the free HellScape airship pack and the free HellScape lights pack. And of course, you can find links to that down in the description. If you don't know what we're working with here, this is called Dungeondraft. You can also find a link to that. And we're going to start with talking about the building tool, which is what you might be used to using if you're using the default assets. And the building tool is great because it's really fast and it automatically makes openings and connections, and it randomizes tiles. But it's got one weakness. It doesn't do very well for patterns that are larger than a single square. My assets are not designed to use this system, but if you are working really fast and you don't care about the limitations of the types of floors you can use, I did enable some of them as actual building compatible. As you can see, these tiles, they're tiles, they tile. So it works pretty well. But if you want to really get the most out of this pack, you're going to want to use the pattern tool and the workflow I'm about to show you. So when I build, I typically will, just for safety, especially if you're doing a spaceship or something, I will start by adding an additional level so that later I can extract the background without doing any work. I just export it as a transparent PNG and I'm done. And I start with the wall tool. So about my walls, I bake in the shadows, and that means that the wall's height in pixels is actually pretty tall. When Dungeondraft's shadows are turned on, it adds an additional big square shadow that's not very great looking. What I recommend is turning shadows off and just using built-in shadows and making your own shadows. Also, some walls are not mirrored left or right. You will need to pay attention to which direction you build. You can see this is a wall that has these kind of support beams built in. You may not like that, and you can use this one that is just blank. I use both. I like these to be hallways and these to be rooms. So let's build a room and some hallways and see how these things work. Let's build a hallway. Cool. You will sometimes get little glitches like this. My best advice is just not to use this type of wall if that's going to bug you. There's really no way to avoid it and still have it automatically drop in these pillars for us. I feel like the speed advantage in adding detail to a level outweighs the disadvantage of occasional distortions. So now we're going to build a room, and we know this one is also clockwise. And I double up my walls in cases like these so that there's a shadow coming into the room. So we built our walls. Let's do portals next. My philosophy with portals is I like, and when I run my games, to have open doors. I don't like to have a closed door sitting there like this, because once that door is open, my players are walking over a closed door, and that's more distracting to me than just having them imagine that there's a door there in the first place. So if you use my doors, you'll see they're just doorways, and you may have to click it twice to build that door for both this wall set and this wall set. And hey, happy accident, looks like it just shifted this, and that looks a little better now. It probably won't stay that way, but okay. So once you've got your walls, then we're going to detail the floor using the pattern tool. And this is, again, not the way you would normally do it if you're used to using the default assets, but it gives you a lot more flexibility. For example, this tile, if I get rid of the grid, is actually 2 tiles tall, and there would be no way to use or to create this with the building tool because it just takes each individual square and places it. I'm going to do this cool tech tile in here this time. And then hallway, let's do this. I like to use these diamond patterns for corners and to add detail. And then on the sections that have length to them, I like this one that has some directionality to it. And if you're like me and it's going to drive you nuts that this one faces this way and this one does not follow that convention, you can actually go in and rotate it. So I've gone to the mouse tool and selected it, and you can rotate it in 90 degrees, and now it flows properly. Even though I just said that, I'm just going to leave that for now for the sake of time. About my objects, I also build in shadows on my objects. So again, I suggest shutting off shadows in Dungeondraft itself. Let's make this some sort of technical room, and that means we want to go to electronics. There it is. And that's where we're going to find these consoles. There are 3 variations of most things in this pack. You've got a stainless steel version, which is kind of the default, and then you get a rusty version, Because again, HellScape is supposed to work pretty well for post-apocalyptic settings, so most objects have a damaged version, and then I have a nice, clean, pristine white version, but I am sticking with my normal style, which is these guys. And here you'll notice that the shadow cuts off on the right side of this, and that's intentional, because if you hold A, now you have this kind of sweeping console bank here. Let's put down console side here, and then if you're working at a console, you probably want to sit, so seating. These are mostly recolorable, just to give you a little bit more variety. Throw down some chairs here. So what I do is I actually run cables to and from electronics. So we're on the path tool here, and this is this gigantic ribbed hose. In this case, let's do something a lot smaller. Cool. All right. So while we're on paths, let's talk about what I've added here. We got that ribbed hose, which is super flexible for all kinds of things. It was not an intentional pun. Let's put this back to size 1. Okay, so this is a curtain on a pole, really useful for bathrooms or just to section off something. Maybe in a hospital, you could put this around the hospital bed or whatnot. This is one of my personal favorites. It's a railing, and it kind of breaks my rule about making things absolutely orthographic, and that you can kind of see the support poles, but I just didn't feel like there was any way to do a railing and have you be able to tell what it is without cheating that a little bit. But those are on rails as well, or in paths as well, so you can make nice rounded corners on things. These are kind of neat, just string lights, so if you've got people kind of living in parts of your ship that were not intended for people to live there, they might have to bring their own light sources. Caution tape, always super useful to have caution tape. So let me show you how to avoid this little problem real quick. Every time you click, you're creating a vertex or a pivot point, you could say, for the path. And so I'd like to go to about halfway through this square. Okay, so I'm going to start my turn here. So I click here, that adds a point right there. And then click here again, click here again, and then click here again. And that gives me a nice controlled path like that. Pipes, super useful. Probably don't want those on the floor though, so let's do that over here. Quick tip for these is to get your perfect curves. I'm going to click to add a vertex, and then you see it's kind of flexing the rest of the pipe. If I hold shift and then click, now I can drag out the actual curve I want and make that precise. And see, when I'm doing that, it keeps it from messing up the rest of it back there by interpolating that curve. Okay, and then let's go back to objects and talk about storage. I believe I called it storage. No, I called it containers. Okay, well, this is an air or space ship, right? And we're gonna have a lot of stuff lying around, but that seems kind of like a safety hazard. So I have created one of my second favorite paths, you could say. It's a ratchet strap. And you've got one, this is it, we're looking straight down at it, and then there's a version where it's laying flat. And so I like to secure the cargo on my ship with this, and we're gonna need to go over. Now they're paths, and for some reason paths really don't like to go over objects, so we actually have to go up to user layer 2. And I try to work with these in such a way that that ratchet strap isn't in a weird spot that doesn't make sense. Like, see how it wants to end right there? Actually, I think that will work out okay. I'll show you in a second what I'm talking about. Some straps. And those look kind of weird, just ending right there. So I have created a ratchet strap end, which I don't remember where I categorized it. So here we go. And so that's supposed to look like some sort of point where it has been anchored to the floor. And I just put those at the end of these. And then if you really want to, you can be extra secure with your cargo and ratchet strap to the wall. Let's just do it with this one, actually. And that comes complete with its own ratchet right there. So you angle that right. Okay, and then the next path to talk about are the shadows. These may or may not be useful to you. It depends on your style and the way you like to design your maps. but I do like to put in a little bit of shading manually. And this is even before we go to the lighting tab. So I'm gonna set fade on and in and out, so it's a nice smooth transition. And then with these, you normally want the smoothness all the way up. If the smoothness is down for any reason and you start to do a turn, you're gonna get a lot of this, and that's undesirable. So with smoothness on, you can avoid some of that. But I don't really use curves a whole lot with these, because my trick is with that fade on, I can just kind of like that. And if you do it right, which I just didn't, you won't end up with bad spots in the corner, and you don't have to worry about these weird artifacts that happen when it starts overlapping over itself. But I've included some of these fade tools in here, and there's several different types. You've got ones that just extend out from a wall so they don't spill over to the next wall. We've got much harsher versions of those, larger versions, and then this double. And the double is still, I think, probably one of the most flexible. So I could come in here and go under layer 1, see if it'll let me do this. And I can add a shadow underneath this pipe really quickly and easily. That's my dog making a bunch of noise. Okay, so, and you can get away with some slight curves, you just gotta kind of mess with it. This double is really useful for going underneath something like this. See, if I start to hit an issue like that where it's just being really bad about things, I'll just terminate one line there and start a new one. And because they're so smooth, it kind of covers up its own imperfections a little. And then also, these are really new and experimental. I haven't even really found a use for them, but I did include some neon lights because, you know, science fiction and cyberpunk and all that, you've got to have, you know, neon lights of some kind. Again, you probably want to start with thickness of 1, and you'll want to, don't want to do fade, I don't think. None. You'll want to use the click, shift, click trick so you can control those curves. And then these, you're going to want to add some motivation to the light when you get to the lighting phase. I don't know what that light's there for, but we'll leave it just as an example. Floor markings, colorable. So maybe it's a restricted area. And maybe you have a reason that people should be cautious around this workstation. So you've got these as an option. And if you're finding that they're, say in this case, it doesn't stand out enough, what you could do is get a dark color, put it here, switch to the version that is a little bit worn and damaged, and go back to my original, and put that on top of it. You could get a fake drop shadow, or you can try to line it up perfectly and get something a little more readable. Okay, here we go. This is the biggest object in the pack. It's kind of a grain silo or a generator or a fusion reactor. You will find it in there in a clean variation and the worn variation that has lots of imperfections and footsteps on it, and people have been patching it, things like that. Let's see, anything else? Storage, we've got some boxes that are colorable. This is the rust one, so it looks kind of funny unless you put it in a rust color. Okay, so I've got steps. I didn't go crazy with the steps. I think there are probably plenty of packs out there that cover these pretty well. So they're just a simple object that tiles appropriately as you go up. And periodically double check which layer you're working on. Otherwise you can end up in a situation where you've got to redo a bunch of stuff. Ask me how I know. So we're going to build a platform up here, and that means we probably want to put the stuff that's going to be underneath it down first. Let's switch to scatter tool. All right, now you can select multiple colors and you can just quickly, shadows off, drop down a bunch of random stuff that's being stored underneath here. You could even select multiple types of containers and just kind of go nuts. There's our clutter, and then do a little bit of advanced work, or work ahead of time, I should say, on shadows. But I know roughly where my platform's going to be. So layer 2 over. I'm just going to throw down some indication that this is lower. And now go into patterns, turn snap back on, and you'll see in patterns that we have some grates. We've got stainless steel. We've got a kind of a rusty version. So I'm going to drop that on top, and now we get to use the railings, and then setting the width back to 1. And just like I showed you with this, if you click a few times in advance of where you're going to take your turn, it will prevent it from distorting quite as much. So I'm going to come all the way up to before I start the turn. I'm just going to click at each one of those points, including the turn and after, and now it's created a better corner. I'm going to do a couple more things here to help illustrate that this is a rising set of stairs. And now you can see that the kind of janky shadows underneath here, they don't really matter. They kind of disappear under all the details, so no big deal there. And what I do with my lighting is I keep it neutral colored, because the VTT is where I want to do most of the color work for my lights, but I bring the brightness down, and then I bring it back up with lights. So I have included this light specifically for this lamp. It looks like it should have some interference to it. And then most of my lighting is done with these guys. I've done, obviously you can see 2 different directions, but in case you didn't know, you can put down a light and then go in with the mouse tool and you can resize it and you can rotate it. So keep that in mind. But for the sake of speed, which is always important when you're a DM with very crazy players that go all over the place, you can just pick the one that is closest to the correct alignment and then fix it later if you really have to. So, hallways. How to light a long hallway without just clicking a bunch of times with a circular, light source. That's what these guys are for. I'm using the mouse wheel and I'm scaling them, and I can just throw down one there, and one here, and then in my style, I do this great. For big rooms like this, I like this big square, because I can kind of just turn the intensity down a little bit, and I can just try to show that there's 4 broad fixtures up on the ceiling. Let's see, anything else to cover on lighting? I guess just while I'm here, I'll explain what some of these lights are supposed to be. Use them however the heck you want. I've already seen some pretty cool uses of them, but in another pack that is yet to be released as of this recording, I've got a lot of assets that are down on a destroyed Earth. And one of the things I wanted was the effect of light coming through a window that's been broken. So in that case, you would have some broken bits of glass on the edge that would still catch that light. So that's the reason why there's kind of an edge to this. Switch tools here. You can see there's kind of an edge to this, and that's supposed to be indicating that there's still a glass there, and then it's just partially blocking some of that light. And then you've got those in 4 directions, and then if you have a window that is not broken, back to the light tool here, then you have this one, which is intended to illustrate or show some dirt and grime on the window that's casting its shadow into the room. Oh yeah, there's one more. There's a wider version of this that can be pretty useful. So this is an orange light. Let's get some nice saturated orange light. We've got a couple portals here. For a jail cell or a brig or whatever, you got these things. You'll notice I have to click twice to put it on both walls because there's kind of doubled up walls there. I've got a porthole, which honestly is a really hard idea to get across from a top-down perspective, but this is supposed to be a porthole. Don't forget to check out the assets if you don't have them already. All the links will be down below. And of course, there is a Patreon where you can get access to these things early and get basically everything I make as I'm making it, instead of waiting for me to get it all polished. And if you have any questions, leave them below.